Radio Berlin 88.8. Hey Music mit Jürgen Jürgens.
This guy is that rich. Why he had to sing?
There's a simple answer to that. That's one thing that you probably, being wealthy, cannot buy is the love of an audience. So that's a challenge.
So
that's what
when did it
interests me.
start?
When I was
singing? 12,
13 years old. I got hooked on Elvis back then. My mom gave me a tape, Elvis Presley, and I became his fan for the next, for a lifetime, I guess. I learned to sing his songs, pretty much every single one. Learned everything about his life. Started writing, translating his lyrics from English to Russian. And that's how I discovered that I can actually write melodies and lyrics that are original. At first I thought these are melodies that I've heard somewhere. And when I've started collaborating with other songwriters, it became clear that I do have some writing skills that could be developed. And over time I've written some songs that became hits, including my debut song Still 10 years ago that became a hit in Russia and nearby countries.
You know that I'm still in love with you.
What about
So
the
many little
Eurovision Song
things.
Contest?
That was fantastic. It was 3 years ago, I believe, 2012. It took place at my home country in Azerbaijan, where I was born, and I was invited to perform as a guest at one of the intervals. Being the biggest name, musical pop name out of that region, it was, I guess, quite an obvious choice, but at the same time, a very honorable place to perform at that time as the world is watching. But since Eurovision, I've done other big televised performances, such as the Olympics at Sochi and Miss Universe, which is huge. So I did get some live television experience.
When I said that I need you now, well, I need you more than ever.
What's different between being a star in Russia and the rest of the world coming to the pop world?
Well, the biggest difference is the fact that I don't think there's any single male solo artist in the pop world that has translated outside of Russia into Europe or United States. And I cannot say that I have, but maybe I've made the first steps, considering yesterday for the, I think, 4th or 5th time I became playlisted on Radio 2 BBC, which is the largest station in Europe, and it's out of Britain. Obviously, that's a trendsetter for many stations. And it gives me a chance to, and a reason to believe that maybe I am doing something right. And obviously, it's such a competitive world. Everybody wants to be successful and have a global career. And only, 2 or 3 names every year evolve of the magnitude of Sam Smith or Adele, or Enrique Iglesias. So being one that has potential and maybe a dream for this to happen, it gives me a lot of confidence in what I do.
This thing is all worked out. Anything you got it.
And you're working together for a new single that is now in our show. We started last week.
Thank you.
Just starting in the chart. With a guy that we know for so many years. He gave us the CHIC thing and so many others he worked with. How do you get in contact?
That was a mysterious thing that I call getting lucky. It's get lucky is something produced, right? I had a show in New York, a small show, maybe 500-700 people. And the next day I was offered to do, while my band was there, a charity event. The charity supports the homeless. And as some of you may know, there was a time when Nile Rodgers was homeless. And he was the honorary at this event. And at the closing, right after he got invited on stage, said a few words. Right after him, I was performing a few songs with my band. And while I was performing, I saw that, obviously his fans surrounded him and he was just taking pictures and giving autographs. He couldn't pay attention. But as soon as one of the tracks came on, which is Boomerang, after the show, he came up to me and said, "Emin, that's a really tight set, and that song Boomerang could be a worldwide smash. And I don't know what hit me on the head. I just said, Nile, not without you on it. He said, oh sure, I'll do it.
You keep coming back into me, repeating our history. Your love is like a boomerang.
And we got together later on, and he just had some ideas how to reproduce this track to take it to a different level. As you know, he's a very experienced producer, and small little tweaks have been a game changer for me, and it became my single, and it's featuring Nile Rodgers. It's an honor. At the same time, I think this is the song that could elevate my career to the next level.
We've got to stick together. Your lips, our word, your smile, so tender.
What about a private guy? What are you doing when you're not trying to get the love of the whole public?
Priority in my personal life are my children. I have 2 sons, and obviously they're almost 7 years old. They're twins. After they were born, my whole life has changed in the sense that they became my priority. So with my travels around the world, I try to spend as much time as I can with them. So every week I fly to see them for a day, for 2, or take them back to Moscow if I can for a week or so. So it's quite tough, but that's definitely my priority. I love doing sports. I do pretty much everything from biking to boxing to running, gym. I do run a full business in Moscow. I have a few restaurants, some fashion brands. I'm also part of my family business. My father's a developer, a big one, so I help him out a little bit as well. So it's a handful, obviously, and I live between a few countries because my family is half based in Moscow, half based in New York. My mom and sister live there. My kids are based between London and Baku. So, I'm quite homeless in that sense of the word.
So it sounds a little bit that singing is a little hobby.
No, it's a top priority. Because that's one thing that I do with my heart. I'm not in the business for the money, which is crucially important, I think, to the music, because it's not affected by the financial factor. And most importantly is everything else I do, I can plan. If you open a restaurant, you could kind of foresee if you do a good job, you're probably going to be successful and profitable. When you record a song, you have no idea of how to pre-calculate the level of the success of that song. Especially when you write a song, you don't think about the output. You think about actually putting down some honest lyrics to some amazing melody. And I think music is crucially the most important part of my life.
Set you free, set you free. Let the rhythm in your soul.
When it started, just translating English lyrics to Russian. And now you're singing the international language of pop music.
Which is English.
Is it in your mind to translate it again to Russian?
For the first 8 years of my musical career, I have only sung in English. And most of the songs I've written were always in English. Although I do write songs in Russian. And only 2 years ago, I was convinced by my fellow artist, a friend in Russia, who's the biggest artist in Russia. His name is Grigory Leps. You might have heard of him. He's an often guest in Germany. To record a Russian album, which I did, and I just got a Russian music award for being the best Russian album for it as a debut album, which was an interesting step for me, because I grew up listening to the international music, basically all the big names you can imagine, and I never thought that I'd be singing in Russian, because it's not exactly translating a song. It's writing from scratch a song that has the Russian mindset to it. The language is quite different, and the style is different. So it is 2 different careers now, although that elevated my career in Russia to different tops, and I became probably one of the top acts there. But nevertheless, Russia I consider is an obvious one. When I sing in Russian and I'm based there, it's quite easy, as opposed to a career in Europe, to have a career there. Whereas Europe has been very challenging, and every market you start from scratch. If I sell out a full venue of 10,000 people in Moscow, the next day I fly in and I do a show in in Berlin, and I barely gather 1,000 people. So that is a challenge that you do in every country. Start from a blank white piece of paper.